I'm super excited to welcome Layla Reyne to the podcast. Layla weaves her bi-coastal experiences into her stories, along with adrenaline-fueled suspense and heart-pounding romance. When she's not writing, she downloads too many books, watches too much television, and cooks too much food with her scientist husband. Her new book, Imperial Stout, which is a spin-off from the Agents Irish and Whiskey series, arrives the day this podcast drops on July 23rd. Welcome, Layla.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It is super exciting to have you on. I became hardcore into Irish and whiskey when I started reading those. Your adrenaline-fueled suspense tagline works 100% right.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to keep that up across no matter what, and it keeps me writing exciting stuff too. So I like it. It's what I like to read and watch and write.
Nice. So. Well, and before we get into Imperial Stout, for folks who may not know, let's talk a little bit about Irish and whiskey.
Yeah.
What is that series about?
So, Agents Irish and Whiskey, Aidan Talley is a FBI agent who lost his husband and his partner in a accident 8 months ago. And he is assigned a new partner who is cyber agent Jameson Walker, which nicknamed Whiskey, obviously. He's also a former basketball player. And he is a cyber agent. And, at first Aidan thinks he's getting demoted in a way to play with cyber, but turns out Jamie's kind of the key to figuring out what happened to his husband and that death. And so, there are mysteries in each of the three books. And then there's an overarch as well. The first book, they are investigating some suspicious activity at a BSL-4 lab. So all the outbreak stuff down in Galveston. And then the second book, they're on an undercover gig back in North Carolina where Jamie played basketball. So I'm a Tar Heel. So that gets woven in a fair bit. So heads up on that one.
I noticed that you've got that San Francisco, North Carolina thing comes right out between the books being primarily set in San Francisco and then Jamie being North Carolina.
Yeah, and that's a little of me. We born and raised in North Carolina and then moved out here in about 14 years ago. So to San Francisco. So you get a little flavor of both. So.
What was your kind of inspiration behind starting the series?
Sure. Part of it is living out here in Silicon Valley. The tech is all around, and we have friends that work in security and cybersecurity, and my husband builds computers when he's not doing the science thing. And so, it's kind of your worst case scenarios, everything that could possibly go wrong. And we actually knew someone who worked in a BSL-4 lab too. So, putting all that together, and then I watched a ton of action movies and cop shows growing up. X-Files was my thing. So I always loved the FBI agents and just kind of found a way to put it all together. And then, the cabinet's full of scotch and whiskey too. But I remember looking at the cabinets going, what am I going to name things? So.
Well, I was going to ask about the names because, each of the individual books has, like, Imperial Stout is certainly liquor-based and cask strength and on and on. So you've referenced looking at the cabinet. Is that how these books get their names, essentially, is what makes sense from the liquor shelf?
To some extent, and the story, for Irish and Whiskey, it was the character names that came first. I knew the one character was going to be Irish, so Aidan Talley, I think I pulled out of a contact list. But I wanted him to be Irish. And then Jameson Walker, I think I had actually what worked best with Talley for a Tally Walker kind of sound. And I was like, oh, Jameson, because what would a Southerner do? We would do something like that. And then it was kind of, what do we get down to as far as titles? We have, I think, almost all the Ardbeg. So it was like, I could name one Supernova. I could name one Wiedegal, but I don't think anyone wants to hear that. So, or figure out how to pronounce it. And so single malt worked, and it worked particularly well for the plot of this guy who was newly single and very concentrated in his anger and trying to figure out what was going on. cast strength, it just getting even their relationship blending in the cask, and then barrel proof to the point that it was finished. And so it actually worked all the way. And then Imperial Stout, they work even better, in my opinion, because with Imperial, it's kind of, Cam is a very stoutish character, so to speak, in his upbringing, even in his appearance, and his stick-by-itness of things. In the second book, Craft Brew, it's a kidnap case, it's the cold case, and it's kind of Cam at his best. And then Noble Hops is the story of Nick's family and how he's noble. And so it actually worked out really well for titles. I love doing titles, so it's always fun. And Tequila Sunrise, because Mel can't stand all the whiskey. She's like, give me a tequila, please.
Yeah, I like how you took the branch off and gave Mel and Danny their own story. And for folks who don't know, Mel and Danny show up in book 1 of Irish and Whiskey and kind of have their nice own side storyline going out through that series too.
Yeah, I wanted to show that. They kind of got on the page together. I wasn't expecting that. And then I wrote that scene in Single Malt where they show up in Galveston and the snark just flew. I was like, well, okay, they're together. Something's gonna happen there. And it just worked out because Mel kind of needs some love too. So.
And it sounds like the new series will be a trilogy as the original.
Yes.
Irish and Whiskey.
Yeah. So there's an overarching plot thread with what's going on with Nick's father and his family. And so that's kind of the overarching mystery. And then we've got the cases, book 1, book 2, and then 3 is dealing with that overarching thread. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I guess we should dive in and talk a little bit about Imperial Stout, because you're bringing Cam and Nick together from who've appeared in the other books. What's your general kind of thing that's going to be going on here? We've hinted at this family mystery.
Yeah. So there's the family mystery going on. There's, it's a different story and a different kind of setup a little bit from Irish and Whiskey, because these two guys know each other. They like each other. It's more along the friends to lovers, coworkers to lovers trope line. And they're older too. Cam's 35, Nick's 45. So it's different in that it's not so much, it is about them getting together in the romance, but it's also about them dealing with their relationship with all the things around them. Cam's family, Cam having to work through his past, and then Nick having to work through his and his family. So that's kind of the differentiating factors and how this is different. And that drives the stories. In this first one, both characters, it's a heist case. Cam has to go undercover. He has to scratch the surface of his old life, which was not necessarily by the law. And Nick is starting to deal with the blowback from some bad decisions his father made. And so, they're already attracted to each other. They want to start a relationship, but they've got these other things that are going on, and trying to deal with their friends about like, hey, let's not tell everybody quite yet. And then you get to book 2 and Cam's family and dealing with the cold case that kind of made him what he is to an extent in the FBI and kidnap and rescue. And like I said, book 3 is Nick dealing with all of his stuff and them getting there happily ever after.
Nice, because of course the HEA has to be there.
Yes, yeah, and these, for anyone who is a little freaked out by Irish Whiskey, these have a little firmer, happy for now endings. I did not pull an end of cast strength on you this time, so I went a little more gentle. So.
But that's kind of what I was telling you before we started recording, that it's rare for me to kind of start a series these days and then immediately go to the next book. And it just yanked me right through from 1 to 2. And I even felt bad that I had to take a pause at the end of 2 to go listen to some other stuff before I came back. And you pull people. Yes, 2 has the cliff. Yeah. But even 1 was a gentle, come this way.
Yeah. I love my tags. That last scene that's, I grew up more television than books. And started writing with fan fiction and also writing screenplay for student television in college. And so my brain thinks of everything as a television show. Mm-hmm. The way the acts progress, the way it's written, the story turns, and there's a tag at the end. There's your tag scene at the front and your tag at the end. And so that kind of plays into it. It's just a matter of, and these all have their tags. In Imperial, there's Cam looking into something. And then at the end of the craft, there's one of my favorite scenes I've written between two characters. It was an interesting scene. I did not know that was going to be the last scene. And then when I wrote it, it was kind of like, oh, I really loved that. So
nice.
Yeah.
Before we lose track of it, what were the fan fiction you liked to write? Who were your couples?
So X-Files, Mulder Scully. I also read /fic, so was reading some of the Mulder Krychek stuff. And then I went to law school, which killed all creativity for about 10 years with that in practice. And then got back into it with just kind of the general CW landscape, Vampire Diaries, Arrow. And it was interesting because the whole time I didn't realize I was writing romance. And that's what I was writing, right? And I was writing romantic suspense, particularly on the X-Files stuff. And then even more so with some of the Vampire Diaries stuff with P&R elements. And then it was kind of like, oh, I'm writing this. I didn't realize this is what I was writing. And so it was a pretty natural progression then into romantic suspense from there.
Mm-hmm.
So
what turned the corner for you to decide to move from the fan and / into your own characters and getting published?
Part of it was time. Some things happened in my personal life that opened up more. I, went solo, all of a sudden had a lot more time on my hands that I could pursue those things that I wanted to do. And then also, I love fan fiction. It's great, but you do get kind of constrained within the bounds of the universe the readers know. Even when you're writing alternate universe outside of, Damon and Elena aren't vampires, they're humans in a law firm, whatever. But you're still confined to what the readers perceive as what they would do. You're still trying to stay in character and certain places that might be familiar, like the same house. So, wanting to basically branch out, have different characters, have their own dialogue, have everything set in San Francisco or North Carolina. And so I think that's kind of, it was largely a circumstance that made it possible. But from a creative standpoint, yeah, I just wanted to play with my own characters. So
that's very cool. Yeah, I love hearing the stories on how this turns, because of course there is a lot of romance writers who started in fanfic.
Well, it's such a great platform, right? You get to hone your voice, you get to learn writing, you get to learn how to take feedback, you get to learn how to take reviews. It's wonderful for prepping you. And then, but you don't have to necessarily do it all. The characters are there, so you can work, the setting may be there, so you can work more on your voice and kind of developing those things so that when you are ready to do it with your own characters, there's some basis there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great jumping off point.
You mentioned you were an attorney and you had all the law school. I imagine that helps a lot as you're researching all of these things that you have going on with the FBI and there are several attorneys, of course, that crop up through here because Nick's a federal prosecutor and
right
and such.
I do transactional corporate, so it's not. I mean, I took the classes in law school, but what's great is that I have contacts. So it's like I need to talk to an AUSA about what happens. Pick up the phone. Now, of course, everything's exaggerated because this is fiction.
Of course.
Like, does it pass the James Bond test? And let's go on. There's that. But yeah, it's nice having a background in it. Somewhat, seeing the inside of a grand jury room, that kind of thing. So, but yeah.
And you mentioned you had somebody who also worked at the lab.
Yeah.
But for like the cyber side of things, I guess you know those people too to at least vet the concept works.
Yeah, I know more of those people than I probably do of anything else. So yeah, I had a good friend who was reading through actually on the beta about Jamie, what he was doing or not, and that was always my question: does it pass the James Bond test? Okay. um, and so yeah, it was good to vet all that too.
And of course, there's always that, how much do I give the reader so it's not too technical babble at the same time?
Yeah, yeah, and I tried to do that of pulling it back down. I'm sure there's still some that's babbly. What was more interesting was probably writing Nick, and it was hard not to go in the legalese. It's like, okay, yank it back a little bit. Even though I don't practice that, knowing what the words are and whatnot. So, but it's always a balance, and that's what editors are for too. So my editors, we've worked together now for 7 books, 8, and so we're pretty good at parsing that out and getting it where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. What's your general process? Are you a plotter, pantser, fall somewhere in the middle?
Oh, I'm a plotter. I'm a type A plotter. So everything is pretty. I write my synopsis in advance, so we've got the basis of kind of what's going on, and do cards. I use Scrivener, so I have the cards in Scrivener of what's going on. I follow it's the W chart of what's going on and the midpoint and down and up, and have all those beats planned out. And then I write a dialogue layer first. Again, coming from screenplay, that's what comes to me first, is a character talking, and they're talking. It also ensures that dialogue drives every scene, so no one's in their head too much. So I'll do a dialogue layer first, and then I will go back through and add in the blocking, add in the emotions, all that kind of stuff. And then once that layer's done, I edit from the back forward. So last scene, first scene, making sure all the threads are tied together. And then it goes to publisher, and then we go through the whole edit rounds. So.
Yeah, and the fun really begins.
Yeah, which, God bless Scrivener, because it makes life so much easier of moving scenes around and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I live and die by Scrivener as well, for sure.
So.
What was the inspiration for the new series? Did you always have in mind that Irish and Whiskey would spin off?
Well, like I said, I knew when Mel and Danny came on the page that they needed a story together. Cam shows up in book 1 briefly, and so in Single Malt, and I was like, I kind of like him. He might need a book. And then I got to 2, and he shows up a lot more in cast strength. I was like, okay, yeah, he definitely needs a book. And then I put him and Nick on the page together in 3, and it was sparks. I was like, they argue, they're great. I didn't know Nick started out as a romantic foil for Aiden and Jamie. But then he with him, it's really a peeling back the layers kind of thing. You kind of don't know what all is under there, including this badass seal. And so, once they got on the page together, it was like, okay, yes. And kind of the trilogy idea worked the first time. I wanted to do that again. I like that, having multiple books to develop the relationship and the plot points. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a brewery we go to every Friday night with food trucks. So it's like, oh yeah, he can have a side gig too.
I kind of like that. It's very alternate side gig from being, the federal prosecutor to I'm going to go work at my brewery now.
And that's a little me. It's here's the writing thing, here's the law thing, and I think so many people have side gigs that it's not unrealistic that someone might have a day job and a different job. You kind of need the 2 outlets for sanity purposes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice little side gig, or and headed towards something for the future, hopefully.
Yeah.
Do you think people need to read Irish and Whiskey in its completion before they pick up this new one?
I kind of relate it to the TV shows Buffy and Angel. You know, if you watched, you could have watched Angel without watching Buffy. Do you have a fuller picture of everything? Yes. Do you know who these side characters are that show up on occasion for special episodes? Yes. So that's kind of what I'd say. You can definitely pick it up having not read Irish and Whiskey. If you want the full effect of it, then, you know, go grab those books too.
Yeah. And I would even say you could take it if you've in the middle of Irish and Whiskey, because that's exactly how I've been approaching it. And it's like you get some hints on what happens in Irish and Whiskey, but it's not like, damn, I wish I'd read that other book first.
Yeah. No, they're there because they all work together, right? So, because Aiden and Cam work together at the FBI, Jamie and Aiden are married, and so like everyone's kind of, they're all in the same orbit. And one of the big kind of the underlying themes of, I think, both series, kind of the Whiskeyverse universe, but particularly the Trouble Brewing series, is family, like finding your family. And because Nick never really had one, and that's kind of his journey, is going from no family to a ton of family, and Cam also making amends with his and having bi-coastal families. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, you know, you get the full picture of it then.
One of the things I like, speaking of family, especially in Irish and Whiskey, is how great Aiden's family is.
Yeah,
they're such a big, awesome, what do we need to do to help you get this done kind of family.
Yeah, big Irish family, right? I was an only child, but we have a big family like that, growing up, big Southern Irish family. And so that's how it is, right? And so that's kind of what that draws from.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier X-Files as like being a driver for the suspense side of things.
Sure.
What else kind of fuels your mind around suspense plot lines?
So let's see. Like I said, the fan fiction, that background, a lot of movies, right? Too, like Man from U.N.C.L.E. I adore.
Oh, nice one.
I can watch it over and over and over. So, and then I like, you know, John Wick too, thinking about it, particularly the way Imperial Stout just drops into action. Like, I thought the opening scenes to John Wick 2 is quite possibly one of my top 10 favorites. I love how that movie just drops you right in the middle of a car chase. Like, could not make me happier. So that's kind of what fueled that structure. And then, you know, I really like that you have the external, from a writing standpoint, I like that you have the external pushing along the internal, and you have them working so well together that no one's in their head too much. There's still lots of plot. I like them balanced. And it's so funny because in the TV shows, I'm always the one going, are they going to get together? Are they going to get together? Even though it's not really a romance movie. Like Castle killed me for years. But so I really like to see that of the external kind of pushing the internal, be it the relationship or the character's growth. So that's why I really enjoy writing romantic suspense.
That was cool. And what sent you down the MM route?
Yeah.
For the romantic suspense?
I had read it some, like I said, in slash fic, Mulder Krychak, Delaric, and the TVD route. And then, you know, I started writing with male-female, be it fan fiction, and then the first manuscript I wrote was along the same time. You know, you're supposed to read what you're writing, and so I had really started digging into romantic suspense books. And there was this great list on Heroes and Heartbreakers of here's the 10 romantic suspense books you should read. About halfway down that list was Cut and Run. And I was kind of shot at that point. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm good. This is what we want to do. I'd also read the Lord John side series from Outlander, and loved him. I loved how tight the mysteries were. And so I kind of, you know, when Single Malt started forming Agents Irish and Whiskey in the head, that's just where it went, as to being two male characters. So
Cool. And I love that you list cut and run. We get cut and run a lot as like
Yeah.
somebody's either their initial read or the inspiration to kind of,
Yeah, I mean,
move in that direction.
I'd read the Lord John stuff. I was like, oh, this is good. I think I'd also asked a friend for some recommendations. I probably read him as well. And then I hit cut and run. I did not go back to the list because 9 books later, I'm in Ty and Zane land, and it's lovely. And then just kind of went from there.
Yeah. And I love that you list him. That's one of my all-time favorites too.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So.
What other authors inspire you in what you do?
Yeah, so I really like, a variety of things. I love authors who I can get lost in their whole universe, right? Kristen Ashley, all of her books, like the Colorado set, it's like, oh, here's the nightingales are showing up over here. So I love those big universes. That's kind of what I'm doing here in building out a universe. Sloane Kennedy's Protector series as well. So I love that aspect. I really like books that I can see in my head as a TV show, obviously, that are really visual. C.S. Picat's Captive Prince trilogy. That was one of my first reads too, and
Yep.
Nora Sakovich's All for the Game series as well. Tal Bauer's Executive Office series. Anything Helen K. Diamond writes, I can just see it playing on a film reel, basically. And those are so exciting, and I love them. And then also authors who challenge me, be it incredible writing, something new to me, or just sheer mastery, like Alexis Hall's prose in anything they write is just fantastic. Anna Szabo, I think, is also pushing the bounds a lot. The aromantic lead in their syncopation book, I thought was just brilliantly done. And then Cordelia Kingsbridge, Seven of Spades series. It's masterful. Like the sheer detail, the planning, some of the scenes, the visuals are fantastic. So those are the kind of things that really hook me in.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good reading list for somebody too.
Yeah, go for it.
We should give a hat tip to your audiobook narrator too before we get too far away from these books. Tristan James he's very enjoyable, and I've heard the first 2 Irish and Whiskeys, and I'm looking forward. I may have to go back and listen to Imperial Stout when that comes out.
Yeah, there's a scene too in Barrel Proof that he recorded, and he texted me right after, and he goes, "I'm crying." Right. And he needed to be in the scene too. So it was like, oh, good. That worked out. But yeah, he's great. He was a reader recommendation. Someone in I had solicited my reader group, who do you think would do this well? I had a list to go from, but I also wanted to see if there were others out there. And he was recommended. And it's been such a great fit. He can do all the accents. And it's just going to get worse with lots of Boston coming in Trouble Brewing Book 2. Sorry, Tristan. But yeah, it's been a great experience working with him.
And what's coming up next for you? There's 2 other of these new books coming out. Do they have dates?
Yeah, so Craft Brew, which is book 2, is out in ebook and audio on October 8th. And then the last one, Noble Hops, is slated for February. I don't have an exact date yet.
Nice. Coming fast and furious there.
Yeah. We like to keep them close, particularly because they are a continuation, and they're not full HEA until the end. So we don't want to keep you hanging too long. It was funny. I remember after Cast Drink that Anna Szabo had texted and emailed going, "Oh my God, I'm dying. Can I have it now?" So that was really funny. And, so we're trying to move them fast. And then I'm going to be doing, hopefully, a little short collection of stories in Changing Lanes, which is the Olympic Swimmers 2 books that I'd put out earlier this year. So that'll come around Christmas time, a little collection of past, present, and future. And then from there, I turned in, the day we're recording this, it's not the day to air, but I turned in the manuscript for Trouble Brewing 3 yesterday. So that was my last one for right now. So it's wide open in the field of what I'm going to do right now.
Oh, is that exciting or daunting?
It's exciting. I'm reading all the things. I'm taking away to the massive TBR over 2 years that have piled up. But then exciting too. I have various different ideas. There's some groundwork for another spinoff in Whiskeyverse that's laid in Trouble Brewing. So there's that option, and kind of a long-running mystery series I'm looking at doing possibly, and then other various little bits. There's this dying chef story that's been on my brain for years. Everyone hears me yammer about. It might be time to finally write it. And then a Shakespeare mystery that I'm kind of looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And tell us a little bit about Changing Lanes for those who don't know that series.
Yeah, so Changing Lanes is a contemporary romance, sports romance, following the four-man U.S. Olympic medley relay team as they train and compete in the Olympics. So the first book is Relay, and that's Alex and Dane. It's a second chance enemies to lovers story. So they'd had a fling a long time ago. Dane's very closeted. He has pretty evil parents that they're very conservative and very, very image conscious. And so he's sort of pushing up against that. And he's on the team with Alex, who he fell in love with when they were 16. And this is 10 years later. And so they're on the relay team. And then the other two members of the team, Sebastian Boss and Jacob, Boss is a veteran, it's his second time through, and he kind of made a mess of things the last go round. So he's trying to be very good, which Jacob is not helping. Jake's the rookie, 19 years old, way in over his head as far as the Olympic experience with Boss, with everything. And that's Medley, which is book 2. And so you see the first book is the domestic training portion that goes into Olympic swimming with them being at the U.S. Olympic facility and a domestic site. And then the second book, they go to an international site and then to the Olympics in Madrid. So it's fun. You get to see a bunch of different locations too. I love the second one, they go to Vienna, and I studied there. And it was so much fun to kind of write some of those places into a story.
That's cool. That sounds like it'd make a nice movie too. All the locations and moving around and
fun.
So you've got a giveaway for our listeners, which is exciting. What have you got?
Yeah. So the cool thing about Imperial Stout and the whole Trouble Brewing series is that they're going to be in mass market paperback. So I will have paperback to give away along with a $25 Amazon gift card.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's exciting. I'll have to not enter that one myself. So we will have details for our listeners on what they have to do to get that right after we wrap up the interview.
Okay.
Awesome. So what's the best way for everyone to keep up with you online, to follow what comes next after you do everything we've just talked about?
Which is a lot. I have a Facebook reader group, Layla's Lushes.
That's an awesome name.
To work with the titles, and so that's probably the place I'm most active. And then newsletter, which you can get to through the website, and then Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And because I have to fan cast everything, there's a Pinterest board with lots of pictures, like Richard Armitage's Nick. So, there's some of those pretty pictures are on there.
Oh, fantastic. We'll link up to all that stuff in our show notes so people can go check that out.
Yeah, it's Layla Reyne on all the sites, so you should be able to find it pretty easily.
Fantastic. Well, Layla, thank you so much for coming by and talking to us.
Thank you.
And for hooking me on such a great series.
I'm glad you're enjoying it, and hopefully you'll continue to enjoy both AIW and Trouble Brewing.